Keith Smith, NBA, Yahoo Sports. He joins us now, as he does each week at this time, as the trade deadline's tomorrow, but a lot going on here in Philly, man. What else is new, right, Keith? What's happening?
Hey, yeah, that's an understatement, I think, is the best way to put that.
Yes. We got a lot to do with the Sixers here. I mean, they're playing terribly. They got bombed the other night in Miami. They got bombed by Boston. They lost to Atlanta. Any trends, anything you're seeing with this team? Is it just, hey, it's the All-Star break coming up, and maybe they're looking past that? Or is there legit problems happening with this team?
I think there's definitely some problems, especially when they go on the road. They are, for whatever reason, they're just a terrible road team. They can't get anything going offensively. Their defense starts to collapse as well. It's just, every team goes through rough patches, but this is now, we're halfway through the season. They're halfway through that road schedule, and they've just been really awful on the road, which says to me, then they really have to get home court advantage. In the way they're playing right now, I just don't see how that's going to be anything that comes. And then when you have, Al Horford, he didn't want to really get into it, but openly saying that there's issues in the locker room, that's a problem, and that's something that, that doesn't really generally get fixed in season unless you start making big trades.
Yeah, he basically was asked if the players need to be called out, and he said there's some stuff going on in our locker room. We'll just keep that internal, which obviously is caught on like wildfire here locally, that, here's the Boston guy saying they got problems in the locker room, and he hasn't fit in really. But, are you surprised that Horford – I remember when they got Horford, you talking about he wanted to be a 4. He didn't want to be the 5 in Boston. He just did it because he had to, and that this role would be better for him. It doesn't seem to be working. Are you surprised that the Sixers haven't figured out? And do you think that Horford can fit, that they just haven't found the right fit yet?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be better for him, but that was definitely what he wanted. He did not want to be a 5. He wanted to be a 4. He made that clear when he signed with the Celtics several years ago, was I'm coming here to play the 4. I had to play the 5 at the end of my run in Atlanta. I don't want to do that. I want to be a 4. And did that on occasion with Aaron Baines next to him, and then ultimately he ended up playing a lot of 5 because Boston's best lineups were with smaller guys in and around him. And challenge is, it hasn't fit. They haven't made it fit. They haven't, done some of the things that make sense to me. I thought by this point we'd see a lot more staggering of minutes between Horford and Embiid. I thought, maybe they'd play about 10 minutes a game together, and then Horford would more or less come out and be the backup center. When in the minutes when Embiid wasn't in there, we haven't seen a lot of that. We're still seeing them spend a lot of time on the court together, and it's just not working because challenge is to do that. You have to have really good spacing around them, and we know that they don't have that. They just don't have the shooters to make that work around those two. So it's a big problem. The other piece is they haven't tapped into Horford's best strength, which is using him as a playmaker and a distributor from out around the top of the arc. It's mostly been because they have the ball in Ben Simmons' hands, and that's not necessarily the wrong thing to do, but that turns Horford into a 6'10" spot-up shooter, and that's not what he is. So that's been a lot of the problem that's been going on for Philadelphia. It's too clunky and it doesn't work.
What's the main issue with the Sixers right now? Because a friend of the show, posted an article on a different website here, 30 problems with the Philadelphia 76ers, and there probably could have been more added to that list. So is it Elton Brand? Is it the coaching? Is it Embiid and the stars? Or when you look at Horford's struggles, what is the cause of them?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's all of the above. I just don't think any of it fit. And I think what you're looking for is you're looking for that locker room leader who's going to be that guy who's going to sit down and say, all right, this is not working. Here's what we're going to do instead. And whether or not Brett Brown, I don't want to go as far to say he's lost the team, but he's been there a long time. And when the same guys hear the same voice, it was Larry Bird, if you remember, when he quit as the Pacers coach, it was coming off 3 fantastic seasons. And they asked him, why did you quit so early? And he said, after 3 years, guys can't listen to the same guy anymore. It's just not going to mean the same thing. They're going to tune me out. And I think that's what you're starting to have. And then you don't have that veteran player. Al Horford's not that guy who's going to come into the locker room and step up and say, hey, everybody listen to me. He's more like the dad who's going to give you the disapproving look versus kind of getting in your face and yelling at you when you do, things wrong or you're doing bad stuff. Simmons and Embiid aren't those guys. They're not those kind of leaders. So I think that's a big chunk of what they're lacking is they just don't have that one singular player who can pull them all together and say, hey, we got to figure this thing out because this is not going anywhere where we want this to go.
What do you think's wrong with Embiid, and what's your concerned level?
I think his hand is definitely a mess. I don't think if we were in a situation where they were solidly in the 2 seed and looking really good, I think he'd be, not playing as much. Maybe he'd be sitting out every other game, and they might have sat him out an additional couple of weeks. So I think that's his physical problem with the hand. And then I don't think he's in great shape. I think because of the fact that he is I don't want to say they baby him, but the way they have to treat him to try to keep him healthy throughout the entire season, I just don't think it lends himself to being in really good shape. And you see in these games, at this point in the year, he looks exhausted halfway through the third quarter. He comes out, and a lot of times I notice he'll come out on fire. He'll be, 20 points by halftime and, 10 rebounds and 3 or 4 blocks, and looks like he's going to dominate. And then midway through the third quarter, he looks like he's exhausted and is done for the night. And that's a challenge, especially when you get into the playoffs and those rotations shrink down and you start putting all these guys together and you're basically saying, we're only going to play 8, 9 guys. You're all going to be able to go 35, 40 minutes tonight. I just don't know that he has it in him.
Talk with Keith Smith. You're hearing all the names. You see the same names we see. Collison possibly want to come out of retirement, and the Sixers kind of have some knocking on the door there. Morris, Bogdanovich. Any of those guys help this team break through?
I think they help this team, but I think you have to be really cautious. That either of the Morris twins, those guys are not known for jumping in and making it be a great locker room experience for anybody. So if you're already having locker room problems, you don't want to add that to the mix. Darren Collison, he's not coming to the East. He's staying out West. He's either going to go to the Lakers, Clippers, or nowhere. That would be a huge surprise. So it's like we've been saying for months now. It's fringe moves around the edges because they just don't have the pieces to do anything better than that. They just don't have, unless they're really going to say, you know what, it really isn't working with Al Horford. We're going to move him and make a trade and do something big. It's going to be tough. There's just nothing you can really do because they just don't have the pieces to get anything done beyond that.
Now, how shocking do you think it would be if the Sixers already decided that Horford wouldn't fit? And would there be a market for him out there? Do you think someone would be willing to take his contract on?
Yeah, there would be a market because I think what teams would do is they would talk themselves into, this guy's been great everywhere until now, and we can figure this out, and we'll look at it, and they'll look and say, well, it's a declining contract. We'd have to make and win the finals for it to be for it to fully guarantee in that final year. So, we're going to get out of it maybe cheaper than we thought we would and those kind of things. So that's where I think you could get a team to do it. Now, the problem is that $28 million, it might take until the summer to do that. But if they decide in the next day or so, the only way to save this thing is to move on from him and either get a whole bunch of players or one different player to come in and do that. It wouldn't overly surprise me because I think Elton Brand is looking at it as, I think he's got to be saying to himself now, I made some mistakes this past summer. I didn't prioritize building a lineup that fits the modern NBA. I built a team that really is more suited for, 90s, early 2000s NBA. And if he has to move on from that, then he has to move on from it. But I would say at the very least, this summer, you're going to see that thing get broken up one way or another because it's just not working no matter what, unless they go on a miraculous run and make it to the finals at this point, which I don't think anybody expects. I think they're going to have to move on.
One of the more popular names that's being tossed around, not just for the Sixers, but when talking about trades, is Derrick Rose. And now recently I feel like, Keith, that's becoming unlikely that he'll leave Detroit. He came out and said, I think yesterday, that Detroit is his home, and it seems like the Pistons are maybe warming up to the idea of retaining him. What do you know?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, the Pistons have set a very high asking price for Derrick Rose, which is what they should do. They should be asking for, for the world, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for them to not do that. But I think the challenge for them comes in with, well, what are you doing if you keep him? You're not going anywhere this season. Yeah, fine, he's on a very reasonable contract next year, but that only makes sense if you're going to rebuild that thing so quickly. They're going to be right back into playoff contention, and that might be their only choice with Blake Griffin, and then we'll see what happens with Andre Drummond. They're not really going to have the ability to tear that down to the studs. So we'll see where that goes. I think ultimately they would move on if they got a pretty good offer. It's just they've set the asking price so high, but we see that all the time. What the asking price is here on Wednesday at 5 o'clock changes drastically by the time it starts creeping up to Thursday at 3 p.m. when the deadline's over. Then all of a sudden it's, well, you know what, let's move on and let's get what we can out of this guy.
Over the past 3 years, the Sixers essentially have had a different starting lineup and a different roster dramatically every 4 months. And now the Sixers are one of the teams that are being talked about that needs to make a move. But is that really in their best interest to once again, whether it's a big piece or a small piece, make another trade and bring in a new player or more into the rotation?
In general, no. You can't keep turning the roster over like that. This is not the process years where you are just mining for gold and just trying to figure it out. You can't do that. You have to have some form of continuity. That's the only way the players buy in as well. The Celtics went through that a little bit where they were a revolving door for a while, and they didn't start to come on the upswing until they started, all right, let's settle this thing in a little. Let's build around a handful of guys here and make this thing work. So now what I think you're looking at, if you're the Sixers, though, is you might be able to get away with it one more time because I think everybody recognizes the pieces don't fit. So that may be your reasoning behind, all right, we got to make a move here and do something different, because otherwise it might get, it's just going to go from bad to worse. But if they make another move, whether it's now or around the draft or as we get into the beginning of the off season, they've got to, whatever it is, build that and then build a roster that fits the modern NBA and then let that ride for a full year, because otherwise you're just going to make a mess of things that's going to be even tougher on you going forward.
A lot of questions today about whether they have tuned the coach out. Joel Embiid said, no, look, he doesn't miss shots. He doesn't miss the assignments, all that kind of stuff. Brett was asked about it. He said no. Obviously, what else are they going to say? But when you watch them play, you've kind of talked about Larry Bird and that stuff. But do you feel that, Ryan brought up earlier about the Cavs got rid of Blatt. They went on to win a championship. Is something that drastic potentially something that could change this team around, or is that not the answer?
Yeah, the David Blatt situation was so different because that was LeBron James, there, and that's a whole different thing. If LeBron, tunes out the coach, then everybody else is going to follow suit. I think what it is I don't think in games the team is openly ignoring Brett Brown and they're not running what he's telling them to run. I think it's the motivational things we don't see. It's those conversations on the plane or that conversation in the locker room and those kind of things, because at this point, what else is he going to say that's any different? What's he going to sit down and tell Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid that he hasn't said, 500 times to them each before? At that point, it's, all right, coach, I get it, and they're going to go back to looking at their phone or, and not even pay attention to it. And that's where it gets really troubling. If you ever see it on the court, then at that point, it's well past time for the front office to move on from the coach, because that's just a sign of disrespect and it's a complete mess. But it's the moments we don't see is where I think that's probably where it's been lost. And then at some point that happens to everybody. Now, do you make that move now? I don't know. They don't have anybody else on their bench. If they still have Monty Williams there, sure, then move on and let Monty Williams take over and let them run it. But not that they don't have good assistant coaches. They don't have that true number one, I'm going to be the lead guy on that sideline and take over kind of guy. And you're not going to bring somebody in who's not currently coaching because there's just not time to make that work in mid-season. It just, the only time we ever saw that was with Hubie Brown, and that went okay. But you're just not going to get in there for people to come in and turn this thing around. It's just too tight.
Keith, one thing that fans have been clinging on to here for a while, if you're taking the optimistic approach to things regarding the 76ers is this team's built for the playoffs. This team is bully ball. And in the regular season, that play doesn't really translate. And the Sixers have had success against the top teams. Well, today they're 6-8 against those teams that are ahead of them in the standings in the East. They're 9-18 on the road now. Those optimistic takes or outlooks, you can't really point to those anymore. So do you still feel confident that this team may be built for the playoffs?
No, I think they are, and I think that they're wrong. Just because of the way things have come together, and they still, maybe they make a big deal and they find those shooter scorer types that they need on the wing, and that helps them out. We can't rule that out because there still is, a day to go until the deadline. But the reality is, I think it's just, I would be stunned if they are able to turn this around, and maybe they'll win around in the playoffs because the matchups will matter, health will matter. But I just can't see them getting past the second round the way they're built. It's fine to say that it's bully ball and the game slows down and defense matters more, but we see it every single year. You need to be able to have that one guy who you can throw the ball to and say, go get me a bucket. Well, is that Ben Simmons? Probably not, because teams are just going to wall off the paint. They're going to say, go ahead and shoot it, and we know he's not going to. Tobias Harris, I don't have a ton of faith that he's going to be that guy to make that work. Joel Embiid, he's a center. Those big guys, they always need help. Somebody has to help get them the ball. He's not going to bring it up and isolate on the wing and make those plays. You look at the play that knocked him out of the playoffs. That was Kawhi Leonard basically saying, here we go, one-on-one. I'm going to make this play, and I'm going to win the series here. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what's tough is you can't go into the playoffs, just doing the exact same things with it. Does Josh Richardson step up? I don't know. We haven't seen that. So I think it's just going to be really, really tough for those guys because I think it's just I don't see how they're going to be able to create offense.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I know you follow Boston a lot. Philly has beaten them 3 out of 4, but the last one, they didn't have Kemba, and they whipped them. Has Boston closed the gap on Philly, or has Philly fallen off?
A little bit of both. I don't think the gap was ever all that big to begin with. A couple, those games are all pretty close. There wasn't any blowouts in there. Even the opening night game, Philly hit a bunch of free throws at the end and put that thing away late that way. So that it wasn't as big a margin as what it really was there. So I think Boston has always felt good about their matchups. One of the things that a scout told me before the beginning of the season when I said, how are the Celtics going to defend these guys? And he went through a whole bunch of things, and then he said, well, remember, they've got to defend the Celtics too. And who's going to defend Kemba Walker? Ben Simmons doesn't want to defend those quick, speedy little point guards who do a bunch of dribbling and come off a million screens. That's not who he is, despite being a great defender. Al Horford, at this point, we're now seeing it over and over again. Teams are saying, all right, come on out to the arc, and we're just going to break you down off the bounce. And that's what the Celtics did over and over and over again. And that's what's tough, I think, for Philly when they match up with Boston. I think Celtics feel really good about that matchup if that one comes to be in the playoffs. And I think right now, if I'm right, that would be a first-round matchup. So we'll see ultimately where that lands.
All right, Keith Smith, will there be major deals, or do you think we're just going to hear a lot of the names and it's going to be minor stuff? Or is there that one big name that we always talk about that isn't getting rumored but moves? I saw you tweet laughingly over here because I'm not a big D'Angelo Russell guy. However, would a Russell Horford deal make some sense? I actually think I don't like Russell. I just don't think he's a winning player. But I actually think he's a better fit than Horford might be here. But something like that. Is there a player that you think will be moved that's not getting talked about a lot?
Yeah, somebody who's not getting talked about, I don't think so. There could be a shocking move that comes, but the problem is you have 6 teams in each conference that feel like if things go their way come playoff time that they can make a run to the finals and maybe win the whole thing. So I think you want to be kind of cautious of that. All right, this is not, we're probably not going to see anything big. Maybe D'Angelo Russell goes. I'm always take this, where there's smoke, there's fire. I always kind of think about that. And then beyond that, it's going to be small moves around the edges. I think you're going to see OKC get out of the tax. I think you're going to see the Warriors dump a couple of their veteran guys to get out of the tax so that they can avoid being taxpayers. And now a guy like Alec Burks, he could help about, probably 12 of those 12 playoff teams. He's a guy who can come in off your bench and give you a little bench scoring and ball handling and do that. I think that's important. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we'll see what it looks like. But I think when you got that big 4-team trade with 12 players, that was the big one that we're going to see for this deadline.
All right, that's tomorrow, 3 o'clock, and of course we'll have our eyes on that. Which team needs to make a deal?
Who needs to make a deal? We spent a lot of time talking about. I think it's Philadelphia. I think they're the ones who need to make a deal the most. I think they're the ones who need to get something done just because it's not working the way they're built today.
Yeah, all right. What do you think of the Capella deal? What's Houston thought there? That they decided to give up on Capella.
Yeah, Houston's basically saying, Philly, we see you. We're going the exact opposite way. We're going to play with a bunch of dudes who are 6'5" and make it look like a Division III college game. And maybe it will. Maybe it'll work for them because PJ Tucker is kind of a unique talent, but they're going to come away with some form of center in that option. They're not going to be in. They're not going to go into it with Tyson Chandler and Isaiah Hartenstein as their only two centers on the roster. They'll have somebody else join the fray there, but they're committed to going small. I like what the Hawks did. They were linked to Drummond, but you got Capella for half the price and just as good a player in my mind. It'll be interesting. And then Denver, Minnesota, they took some flyers on guys. We'll see what it looks like. Maybe cleaned up their cap sheets a little bit going forward. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come through. But, yeah, Houston's ain't going to gamble that being small and switchable is the way for them to win this thing.
How about Miami? Do they do something?
They're trying. They've got a lot of contracts. Their problem is no one wants the second years for any of their guys. If it was 1 year left for James Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, Deion Waiters, they would have already done a move, and probably a pretty big one, because they can put together 2-3 salaries to go out and match to that big salary. They're just getting a lot of trouble getting anybody to bite on taking on that second year, and that's going to be a problem for them. Now, we'll never see, because, again, things change all the way up until tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Maybe some team's going to come and say, all right, yeah, we can go. We can we'll do this. We'll take on those bad years, and we'll figure out a way next year. Because one of the things I'm hearing from a couple teams is you've got those 5 or 6 teams that are going to have a good amount of cap space, but the free agents stink. So there's a belief of, well, if I take the money now to get something and move this guy out, I can move that money again not next year, but in the summer, I can move that money by attaching a pick to it or a young player or something like that to one of those teams that doesn't want to overpay free agents, because then they will be an expiring contract. There'll only be 1 year left. So yeah, the Heat are going to be active. They are active. They just haven't been able to find a fit just yet.
Alec Burke helped the Sixers at all?
Yeah, 100%. He'd be great for them. And that's a guy I think you need to keep an eye on because he's easily acquirable because he's on a minimum contract. So I think if you could make something work to go get a guy like Alec Burks who can handle the ball a little bit off the bench, can give you kind of that backup point guard play, but he's also a pretty good scorer and shooter, veteran. He's been through a couple of these playoff runs. I think he'd help the Sixers. The problem is the Warriors are staging a little bit of a bidding war. We're not going to go crazy because it's Alec Burks. But they're going to be able to get something maybe better than what we think for a guy at that level, just because a lot of teams are looking and saying this might be our best chance. This is the best guy we can get because of his contract. It's so easy to take in.
Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports NBA. How disappointed was Boston that they couldn't get Capella, and are they still looking for a big?
Yeah, they're not really looking for a big. They as far as I've been told, the Rockets came to them and tried to get them in on that trade as they were trying to build that trade out with Minnesota as the third team in. And the Celtics, they listened, but their issue is they don't see Capella as giving them anything that Enes Kanter doesn't give them, because he's only going to play similar minutes to what Kanter plays. They weren't going to give up Daniel Tice. He's too important to them. He's just a good defender, makes a third of the money that Capella does. Good outside shooter and a pretty good passer. He's essentially playing the Al Horford role from a year ago for them. So I think what you're looking at there is the Celtics were, all right, we'll listen, but nothing set up for them to do that made sense, because they weren't going to give up those guys. They're not giving up any of their top 7 players in a deal, because those are guys that they like, and they like them on the contracts they have them on.
All right, there you go. 3 o'clock tomorrow. We'll keep it locked on that. And, of course, at Keith Smith NBA. Follow him for all the NBA news. And, of course, every Wednesday after this week, we'll have the All-Star break coming up, and then the final 31 for this Sixers team. We'll see if they can get it together. Brett Brown today saying the Sixers aren't tuning him out. An article in the Inquirer today, Keith, real quick, suggesting that the ownership group is too buddy-buddy with the players, and that essentially means they tune the coach out because there's no repercussion because the ownership group and them are all buddies. There's a lot going on here.
Just a normal day.
Well, that's the old saying. You can't fire the players, right? So you always fire the coach.
Yeah, man. All right. We'll see what happens there. All right. Keith Smith back again next week with us here to wrap up the first half of the NBA season. Thanks, pal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Keith Smith, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.